This special edition of the Life Sounds Good podcast was recorded remotely.
Welcome to Life Sounds Good. I'm Wendy, and Mike's away today, so I'm on my own. And it's probably a good thing because we've got 6 others who are going to be joining us to talk about their trip to Rwanda. Stay with us, as you know, life sounds good. So today we're being joined by a whole raft of people from Hear Well, Be Well. A group of them went to Rwanda in the late fall as part of the International Gift of Hearing program that's run by Hear Well, Be Well. Joining us today are Christine Rosenberg, who is usually in Bolton, Leanne Williams, who is one of the field managers, Jotham Pratt, who is an HIS in Huntsville, Nancy Robinson, who's another field manager, and Kathleen Teed, who is co-CEO with her husband, John. All of them jumped on a plane, flew halfway around the world, had a lot of adventures while they were there, and we're going to just find out how successful the trip was. Kathleen, can you give me a very brief sort of history on how the International Gift of Hearing came to be?
I was already going to Rwanda helping orphan genocide survivors as of 2010. And so when I met John, he came down with me in 2012, and he felt the same way I did, just a deep compassion and love for the people and the country. And so when we started Hear Well, Be Well, John said, why don't we see if we can't get manufacturers to donate hearing aids to us that can't be sold in Canada? And why don't we find a means by which I can start to help people from a hearing loss perspective as you help the orphan genocide survivors. So as of 2014, John and I have been going down to Rwanda on a regular basis, and he works in a hospital, and he is teaching the ENTs and the other doctors and nurses on how to dispense the hearing aids that he has brought, such that after a few weeks, they have enough knowledge that they can carry on and fit people with hearing loss with hearing aids that we have brought from Canada.
You mentioned that you're taking hearing aids that can't be sold in Canada. Nancy, there would be some people who would say, why are there hearing aids that can't be sold in Canada? And why are you helping people halfway around the world instead of helping people here? What's sort of the background around there being hearing aids that we can't sell in Canada, and so we wind up taking them to Rwanda?
In Canada, hearing aids fall under the Prescription Act. So much like prescribed pain medication or other medication that you may receive and be dispensed from a pharmacist in Canada, hearing aids are much in the same. When you are done with your technology, unfortunately, they cannot be recycled in Canada. They cannot be gifted, sold, or willed. So essentially, they end up in landfills. And the really unfortunate part is that in many cases, there's nothing wrong with the hearing aids. They are easily reprogrammed, but our hands are really tied in Canada what we can do with that technology. So we take the technology to places in the world that do not have the same prescription laws that we do in Canada in efforts to help people that may not be able to have access to that kind of healthcare.
What's the infrastructure like in Rwanda that makes it so that they need the support from offshore in terms of hearing health?
The infrastructure is growing and getting stronger and stronger and more robust. So internet systems, there's lots of fiber optics, so we can do the work there. But the reality is it's still a developing country. Because of the work that we did in this hospital, the ENT doctor, she actually has now set up her own hearing aid clinic. That's the first one in Rwanda. So unless you are from the military, where you can go to a military hospital, there's no access to hearing aids in Rwanda. And with their healthcare system, vastly improved now, but from years in the past, a child could have meningitis and not be treated and have tremendous hearing loss, or through what they suffered from the genocide itself, people were exposed to loud noises like gunfire and bombs, and that caused instantaneous hearing loss. So it's a community that has hearing loss in a way that we don't see in Canada. The very young, the teenagers, the very old, not having had their hearing loss treated.
Jotham, while you were there and as a hearing instrument specialist, you did quite a bit of work in the hospital. What was that experience like for you?
Very different than here. Just the whole setting in general was quite neat to see what they did have and what they didn't have, but what they would maybe do with what they did have. And it was also very interesting to see all the losses that came in were very different than what I usually would see here day to day. A lot more severe hearing losses that people that normally would have been treated long ago that had gone mostly likely years without being treated, with essentially what would be considered some cases legally deaf here. They just didn't have access to the resources to get treated until that such time as we were there and were able to accommodate that.
Christine, did you spend any of the time in the hospital?
I was there for probably one day at the end, and I think there was a couple of hours that I had stopped in, and that was most of my time was taken elsewhere.
What did you feel sort of inside seeing the people who were being treated by the International Gift of Hearing team?
I think what struck me most was probably their gratitude after the hearing aids were dispensed. The smiles on their faces, the joy of them hearing things clearly for the first time, the interactions with our specialists and how they reacted with them to give it such a positive experience for them for hearing for the first time, letting them hear certain words, certain sounds that they probably hadn't heard in years. So that's one of those ones that kind of gives you the goosebumps when you saw the effects. The effects at home give you the same feeling, but for somebody who has struggled for so long, has finally seen or heard something that they haven't heard. Anything, people, their family, their loved ones. That's kind of what struck me the most.
Leanne, did you get a chance to spend some of the time that you were in Rwanda at the hospital?
I did spend a day there as well, and it was absolutely amazing to be a part of it, to see the expressions on their face. Sometimes Jotham and Nancy, they played some music for some of the people, and it was amazing to see the smile that instantly came to their face, or hearing their loved ones for the first time in many years. Being able to hear them was just an amazing experience to be a part of.
Nancy, when you were working at the hospital, what did you find to be the greatest difference between doing the work in Rwanda and doing the work here in Canada?
I think that one of the biggest differences, which Jotham kind of touched upon, was that we are used to ideal settings in our clinics with very sophisticated equipment, soundproof booths, ample opportunity to not only test a full range of frequencies ourselves, but also verify the instruments. And unfortunately, we weren't afforded the same privileges in Rwanda that we were here in Canada because of the limitations of the infrastructure there. So we were working from Chuck, which is a training hospital in Rwanda, in Kigali. And we were working with ENTs and nursing staff, and we were all in one room because that's all that they could accommodate was, one larger room. So we had 3 computer setups with, Rwandan hospital staff working from each of those computer stations with either myself, John, or Jotham as their support team as they fit the instruments. And it was very different when it comes to like a verification perspective, because we're used to running real ear, we're used to verifying with sound field verification. And unfortunately, we were significantly limited because of the space there. So it was hold up your left hand, touch your nose, kind of verification with some of the younger patients. We had translators, which was a huge benefit because we don't speak Kenyan Rwandan. So we needed people there to be able to translate so that we could give proper instruction, which isn't needed here in Canada. Usually we have other means to overcome English as a second language. So it was a very different environment than what we're used to, but we made the best with the circumstances that we did have.
Jotham, approximately how many people did you end up treating?
Between the three of us, at least 60. I don't know if Nancy, would you agree with that or around there?
I would say probably closer to 70 or 80. A lot of our fits were monaural. So in Canada, about less than 2% of our hearing aid fits are a single-sided loss, whereas about 30% of the people that we treated in Rwanda had a single-sided loss.
Why is that, do you think, Nancy?
I think to Kathleen's point about lack of basic health care when it comes to treating things like infection, we saw a lot of young adults in their 20s and their 30s that had ear infections that, because of the lack of access to basic medical health care, tried traditional or home remedies to help with those infections before having medical intervention. And I think that resulted in a lot of single-sided losses that we did treat there.
Kathleen, you mentioned that you go to manufacturers to see if they can donate hearing aids. What manufacturers have supported the International Gift of Hearing? And do you get donations from individuals that can then be repurposed, recycled for International Gift of Hearing?
We primarily take down Bell-tone product. We have a very strong relationship with them. They're very supportive of this. Some of the other manufacturers, for example, Starkey, have their own distribution for charitable work. Certainly Signia, which is a wonderful company as well, they donated 30 laptops. So some of those laptops went directly into the hospital so that all of the programs needed to fit the hearing aids could be accommodated, and so those were left at the hospital. So from our offices, we did take down hearing aids that we had in our office that were not saleable from various donations, as an example, demo products that we use in our office.
If somebody did want to donate old hearing aids, Leanne, what would be their process?
For anyone who wants to donate old hearing aids, they can drop them off to any of our locations, and we would be happy to accept them on their behalf.
What happens to them after they are donated, Nancy, that makes it so they can then be used by someone else?
Essentially, what we do in the office is we start by cleaning the instruments, ensuring that they are in good working condition physically before we connect them to the software. So we connect them afterwards, after cleaning, to the software to ensure that they are working properly and they are usable technology in other places.
As part of the trip to Rwanda, you had some sidebar things going on. You had things besides fitting hearing aids and training medical staff. And Christine, I understand that you took the lead on quite a bit of the fundraising and the gathering of items that went as additional support. Can you tell me a little bit about what happened at Hear Well, Be Well leading up to the trip to Rwanda?
Well, that was a partnership with myself and Leanne. We had looked for donations that we could potentially use throughout Rwanda in the villages, or that could be sold to help get some more financing going. We did some fundraising within our clinics, the fundraising, which some of it was bake sales. Some people did book sales, and just generally looking to see different ways that we could help the people of Rwanda within our small communities. So each community, we had kind of given them a bit of a challenge to see if they could raise roughly $600 per clinic. Most of the clinics rose to that challenge. People were very, very generous with their support.
One of you mentioned in a presentation or in an email how safe you felt in Rwanda, which I'm not 100% convinced a lot of Canadians would have that thought in their head. Leanne, I think that might have been you that said that. Can you expand on what it's like in Rwanda that prompts you to talk about how safe you felt when you were there?
Well, before going down, you're always, of course, reading information. So you're trying to gather as much as you can. So I absolutely went into this with an open heart and open arms and just kind of took it as it came. And when we finally arrived there and we were walking around, I had absolutely no fear or felt unsafe at any time walking. Kathleen and I did a couple walks in the morning on our own. And at that time, the people were just always looking at you and they were smiling. They would say good morning. When we walked to the grocery stores a couple times, the three of us ladies, we went down, and at no time did I ever feel that I was unsafe. People always gave us our space, because you always, of course, have some fear of maybe being pickpocketed or put in an uncomfortable situation, and that I did not feel that way at any time.
Was that sort of a unanimous feeling? Nancy, how about you?
I felt safe the entire time. So my best friend and I had this conversation before we left. She said, Nancy, I really want you to have like the best time, but please be safe. Don't go to gas stations at night. And I was like, Jen, why would I go to gas stations at night? So upon arriving at the airport, again, it was like 2:30 in the morning. We had been picked up by people who we had met online, but never in person. And there was 2 vehicles that picked us up because we had many bags each of donated items that we had taken. So upon being picked up from the airport, I asked one of our translators and drivers, his name was Jado. I asked him how long until we get to the hotel. Like, we were so tired. We just wanted to get where we needed to be at 3 o'clock in the morning and sleep in, a horizontal bed. And as we got picked up, we were in the car for about 5 minutes, and we turn a corner and go up a hill. And Jado's car stops and he says, there's something wrong with the pump. And we conveniently are at 3 o'clock in the morning right beside a dark gas station. So they pull in. And once we pull into this dark gas station, all of the Rwandans that we were with got out of the car. And I remember looking at Christine and Leanne, and I said, all of the things that we've just been through, is this how we die? We have been here for 10 minutes. And I have found myself the first stop at a dark gas station in Rwanda. And the Rwandan people had said, we're just going to go and wake up the gas attendant to get some gas so that we can carry on to the hotel. And we're like, you're going to wake up who? But that very much is the culture in Rwanda. They have their gas attendants, their hotel attendants, kind of sleeping on premise and ready to serve the people there. So they did, in fact, get gas, and we carried on our way. But I very much felt the same. I'm, not as well traveled as some of the people in this room, but I enjoy traveling. And I have never felt safer in, a different country on my travels than I felt in Rwanda.
I'm certain that's not the first thing that goes through Canadians' minds, because we've been exposed so much to the information about the genocide because of Romeo Dallaire's book and all the publicity that he got around that book. Safety would not be the first word that would come to people's minds. And when I mentioned Romeo Dallaire, Nancy, it makes me remember that you had a really special reason for wanting to go on this trip. with the International Gift of Hearing. Do you mind sharing why this is kind of a lifelong passion for you?
Of course. So I have always been a reader since I was very young, and even now into my adulthood, I've always got my nose in a book. And when I was in grade 11 for a book report, I picked up Romeo Dallaire Shake Hands with the Devil, and I was captivated within the first couple of pages. His book is a lot about, so he was on a peacekeeping mission in Rwanda, and he saw the kind of the writing on the wall when it came to the genocide in Rwanda, and had asked for a lot of extra support from the international community, which he never received. And he felt really powerless in his book, watching these events unfold as the international community sat back and was very silent. And I remember, as a 16 or 17-year-old reading this book, not only being able to conceptualize that the fastest genocide in history happened in my lifetime, but I also had a really hard time conceptualizing that we had the means to do something about it as an international community, and we didn't. And that really changed a lot of my perspective about the international community, about politics, about Western country, about colonization. The list goes on. But it really shifted something in me and in the way that I perceived humanity. And I went to Ryerson University, which is now TMU in Toronto. And I actually have an undergraduate in criminal justice. And a lot of my other studies were in law and history. And I took courses on U.S. international relations. And I again had opportunities to write about Rwanda, which I did on several occasions because I was really captivated with what had happened there and the interaction of the international community as those events unfolded.
So was it everything you expected when you got there?
It was not what we envision as Canadians. It is an incredibly beautiful country. It reminds me a lot of Costa Rica, very lush, very tropical, very hilly. But Rwanda is exceptionally clean. And there is a really wonderful pride of the people that live there for their country and for their president, which is something that I didn't expect traveling there. We had an opportunity to go through the Genocide Memorial in Kigali. And the Genocide Memorial in Kigali is the burial grounds for over 250,000 Tutsi victims of the genocide is the best way to put it. So 250,000 Tutsi individuals are buried at this genocide memorial in Rwanda. And it was very powerful to go through that memorial as a human, but it was very powerful to go through that memorial with two of our translators, Jean-Claude and Kinesis, who were also genocide survivors. So to walk through this memorial, to see these sobering pictures, to read these sobering stories, and to experience that with people who lived this as their reality was really, really powerful. For me, it was something that was a full circle moment that I never really knew would be a full circle in my lifetime, right? It's something that I always dreamed of, in my younger years, was traveling to a place like Rwanda to experience the culture and the history there. And I'm really grateful that I got to do that because it really was a once in a lifetime opportunity.
That's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that, Nancy. If we think about the highlights of your trip? I would imagine some of them would be the same for each of you, but some of them might be different. Jotham, what was the highlight or the very special moment for you?
Just being in the hospital in general and hearing all the well wishes from all the very sincere thanks from the people we were fitting was a highlight in itself. However, there's definitely those standouts that just kind of warm your heart. I'm sure it's the same for many others, but there was one little boy. He was 4 years old, born legally deaf, and he was nonverbal because he hadn't been able to establish vocabulary at that point, hadn't picked up or heard enough of it yet. And so we were able to fit hearing aids on him, and just seeing the smile on his face that never went away the entire time was hard not to just tear up and enjoy seeing him hearing the world for the first time, watching him hear his steps. The next day, he was back to have an adjustment. I heard a little kid just kind of singing. I'm not sure if it was words or not, but singing in the hallway, and I looked out and it was actually him. So it's pretty neat to hear because he was hearing his own voice as well there.
I like that story, Jotham. Thank you for that. Leanne, what about you? What was your special moment?
Oh, there were so many. I guess one of my special moments was actually when we got to go to Rwanda. It was our very last day, and we got to be involved and watch them play we had a whole community come in, and we played with them with soccer. And it was just amazing to see the smiles on their faces, the laughter. Oh, the kids were running and their flip-flops were just flying off, chasing these balls. It was just a great experience. And then, of course, Jotham brought in some suckers, and him and John were attacked for their suckers because they all just wanted to have this candy, and just the smile and just the enthusiasm. It was just amazing.
So the big question now is, do they call it soccer or do they call it football?
They would call it football.
Thought maybe. Awesome. Christine, what about you? What was your highlight?
Again, there was a lot, and without touching on anybody else's, I did find that the innocence of the children didn't matter where we went. They would run and chase us and follow us down hills and over, yelling at us, whether we were on a little boat trip or, it was just, they always wanted to find their own adventure in seeing whatever it was, whether it be us but the other thing that I found very, very powerful was the pride in these people. The first time I had been to Hope Village, I had met, Kathleen, I know I'm going to get his name wrong. Noel?
Yes.
Oh, I did it. Thank you. Anyways, and this is a man whose home is right smack in the middle of a cow field, if you will. And very pleasant man, invited us into his home, very open. And then we saw him the last day in Rwanda. And I honestly did not recognize him because at this point he had completely transformed himself in dress clothes, in a beautiful shirt. And his face was familiar, but I couldn't put him in the middle of a cow field. And all of a sudden I recognized it, and I recognized the pride that these people put on for us. We went in silly little shirts that I made, and they all got dressed up to see us. And the pride that they put on for all of us, it was an incredible moving moment because they had nothing but were willing to give their shirts off their backs for us. And it was incredible to see that kind of, I don't want to call it commitment, but love that they had. And they didn't even know me. The first time you meet somebody, they give you a hug. And I'm like, whoa, not that I'm opposed to hugs, but it was like, I didn't know that I was going to get that. And that was pretty powerful. And every single person you met, extended their hand and then extended a hug. And that was pretty neat. You don't get that here at home. Everybody's like, whoa, back off, So, hugs were a daily thing.
Nancy, is there a different highlight from the story that you already told?
I agree with Leanne. I felt like Rwanda was really special to me because one of my passions, in addition to helping people here, is soccer. So I was able to reach out to some of the clubs that my son plays for in Canada, and they very graciously donated a lot of soccer kits, balls, pumps, cleats that we were able to take down with us. And it was really powerful for me and Risheshe to go with the kids and to enjoy them, playing soccer, and to see, that football really is a universal language. So that was really, really special for me. But I found that in all of the wonderful things that we did there, the tours of Kigali City, we went to Akagera National Park, throughout all of those wonderful experiences, I kept finding myself being like, I want to get out of here and I want to go back to the hospital with Jotham and John, because there was something really powerful about meeting people and helping people that otherwise would not have had access to this kind of healthcare. And Chuck was just a really exceptional experience, not only from a patient perspective, but also being able to work with the hospital staff and empowering them to continue to help people even after we had left.
We really appreciate everybody joining us and telling us about their trip to Rwanda. That kind of philanthropic support from communities and from corporations and communities is always valuable, whether at home or worldwide. Join us next time on Life Sounds Good, where we're going to be talking to Nancy Holmes, who's sharing a really heartfelt story about caring for her father in his elderly years as he experiences hearing loss. Follow us on Facebook, and if you've got a story about hearing you'd like to share, send it to us at podcast@hearwellbewell.ca. Thanks for joining us, and always remember, life sounds good.